So I did my presentation on the NOD2 gene, and this is implicated in multiple diseases, but I'm going to be focusing on Crohn's disease. So NOD2 stands for nucleotide binding oligomerization domain containing protein 2. It was formerly known as CARD15. It is found on chromosome 16, and it is an intracellular protein that plays an important role in the immune system. So NOD2 protein is active in immune system cells. These are cells like macrophages, monocytes, and dendritic cells. As we know, these types of cells protect the body against foreign invaders like bacteria or viruses. And additionally, it is found in different types of epithelial cells. These are found primarily in the intestine, however, they are all over. And they help protect the intestinal wall against bacterial infection. They serve as sort of a barrier. This intracellular protein is sort of known as an intestinal sampler, which it will take from the GI lumen and kind of test the bacteria in order to signal the correct immune response. The protein also helps create systolic regulators of apoptosis, which we know is cell death. So overall, all of these different functions that NOD2 cascades into will help homeostasis within the immune system and particularly within the gut. So looking at NOD2 on an even more cellular level, here we have a picture I actually drew that I think makes it a little more simple. And this is showing NOD2 intracellularly and the way in which it stimulates something called nuclear factor kappa beta, drawn there as NFKB. And nuclear factor kappa beta will release specific cytokines, which will then tell the macrophages around to be on sort of high alert, which is that immune surveillance we were talking about. And additionally, the macrophages tell things called T helper cells to make another specific cytokine known as interleukin 22. And interleukin 22 makes defensins and mucins, as we know, which protect the gut, and they upregulate autophagy against bad bacteria. And this is kind of overall showing how it's controlling the bad bacteria within the lumen. So what exactly would a mutation with the NOD2 gene do? So as we said, this protein is kind of the sampler, in other words, a bacterial sensor, and it will not be effective at doing its job, which will disrupt the immune response, as we just talked about in the previous slide. That kind of cascade which is happening won't occur regularly, and there will probably not be stimulation of the nuclear factor kappa beta, and we will be missing the release of specific cytokines like the IL-22, and therefore, because the IL-22 is upregulating defensins and mucins and autophagy, as a result, we will lack those things in somebody with Crohn's disease within their gut. And from there, it is obviously sort of a cascade effect. There will be more growth of the bad bacteria, which will cause dysbiosis and trigger more immune response and more cells kind of attacking the gut, and as a result, that will cause inflammation and ulcers. So what does all this dysregulation of the immune system and dysbiosis look like? In some cases, this presents itself as Crohn's disease, which we've touched on a bit in class. Crohn's disease is inflammation of the gut. It is patchy in nature, so it can show up in different areas of the colon. Specifically, NOD2 is linked to ileal disease, which means it is in the disease is mostly in the ileum. It is inflammatory bowel disease. It's under that category along with ulcerative colitis. It is a multifactorial disease, which means we don't know the exact cause of it. In the IBD space, we kind of call it the perfect storm. It can be genetic. There are environmental factors, but they don't know exactly what causes it. And the symptoms include with this inflammation in the gut, abdominal pain, of course, fever, diarrhea, and weight loss. Specifically, NOD2 was linked to Crohn's disease in 2001, and we still don't know the exact mechanism by which this mutation leads to Crohn's. It said, as we talked about earlier, the nuclear factor kappa beta. We don't know whether that's overstimulated or understimulated. And what is said to lead to this dysfunctional protein is a frameshift mutation. As we know in class, nucleotides are read as 3s, and the frameshift mutation happens when 1 or 2 nucleotides are added or subtracted. And this causes, as we talked about, the different amino acids to be coded, leading to this dysfunctional protein. So there are some treatment options for Crohn's, and these include biologics, immunomodulators, and steroids to counteract that inflammation. You've probably seen commercials like Humira, Remicade. There are very effective treatments. We know these treatments do work on a portion of Crohn's patients. We just do not know who is going to respond to what, and that is kind of where the search for treatments has led. Research is going more into what is predictive of whether somebody will respond to a therapy. So specifically, I looked at a 2012 study which looked at NOD2 carrier status and whether it was predictive for a response to a therapy. And they found that a higher percentage of Crohn's patients with the NOD2 mutation carrier were steroid refractory, which meant that they stopped responding to steroids, but that they were treated well with immunosuppressants. It also showed that there was a higher remission rate, which means your disease is under control within 1 year of a biologic therapy in Crohn's patients who did have this mutation. So that's kind of broad, but overall it shows us how information with this gene can tell us maybe what is a good treatment path for a specific patient. And here are my references. Thank you.